My son said I wasn't welcome for Christmas anymore. On New Year's Day, he learned the home he bragged about now didn't welcome him either. My name is Samuel Reed. I'm 72 years old. I built houses for 40 years, and I still like the work that holds. Since my wife died, I turned the porch light on at dusk, the way she taught me. I am a careful man who keeps receipts and promises. My mistake was expecting the same in return. I stood on Michael's porch and watched the pale blue LEDs buzz along the gutter. I had paid for those lights the same week I fixed his leaking sink. He held the door half open like a hotel clerk, not a son. The smell of cinnamon drifted out. Someone laughed inside. Not a place for me, apparently. He said it in a practice tone like he had rehearsed it in the mirror. I wasn't welcome for Christmas. He kept saying it was not personal. It was tradition now, and his wife's family did a big meal. My name did not fit the seating chart. I kept my hands in my coat pockets. Cold bit through the wool. He shifted from one foot to the other, trying to look busy. I stared past him at the tree in the living room. My granddaughter's star leaned a little to the left. I had climbed that ladder with her in November. We had laughed when the plastic hook snapped and I tied it up with picture wire. I remembered how steady her small fingers were. I thought about my wife. Her rule was simple. A home should never greet you in darkness. If you came back late, you left a light on for someone else. Michael knew that rule. He had grown up under it. Now he hid behind tradition. I did not argue. A younger version of me would have pushed inside, raised my voice, and made everyone uncomfortable. The man I was now did not beg. He also did not forget. "Understood," I said. He nodded like a manager closing a case. He wished me a happy holiday in a voice that did not bend. Then he shut the door. I stood a moment longer and looked at those blue LEDs I had drilled in. Cold air burned my throat on the way down. Cars slid past on the wet street. I turned and walked back to my truck without looking back. I pulled away slow. In the rearview mirror, his house glowed like a showroom, and I kept my eyes on the road. The first thought in my head was petty. The second was not. I would not argue. I would remember. And I knew exactly what I still owned. The road from his suburb to my place ran along the river and then cut through a strip of old warehouses. I drove in silence. The radio was off. The wipers clicked on and off against a thin mist. I thought about the years when Michael had called me for every small thing. A dead outlet. A stuck window. A job lead. A ride. I had never said no. I turned onto my street. My porch light was off because I had left before dusk. I parked, got out, and flipped the switch inside the door. The yellow light pooled out across the steps. It was a little thing, but it steadied me. I took off my coat and hung it on the hook my wife had always used. Her scarf still hung beside it. I did not touch it. The house was quiet. Not the bad kind of quiet, just the regular kind. I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water and let my hands stop shaking. Why did he say it that way? Not welcome. Who had taught him to speak to his own father like a landlord? I pictured his face at the door. Tense, eager to get it over with, afraid of missing his cue inside. I could taste the word tradition in my mouth, dry as sawdust. I stood and went to the hall closet. There was a small safe box on the floor under a stack of blankets. I slid it out and set it on the kitchen table. My key was taped to the bottom. My wife had done that years ago, when she said I put things down wherever I felt like and forgot them. I smiled once, quick and sharp. Then I opened the box. Inside were papers that had built a life. The pink slip to my truck. Insurance. A thin folder with Michael's name on it. I left that folder on the table and put everything else back. The lid shut with a small click. I sat down again. I placed my palm on the folder without opening it. I remembered the day we had walked through that house together for the first time. His face was so open then. He said he would take good care of it. He said he would make me proud. I reached for the folder. I knew what was in it. I had set the terms years ago. I had kept them safe. I had not told him everything. I pulled the folder closer and opened it. The phone rang while the folder lay open. I looked at the screen. Michael. I could have let it go to voicemail. I pressed accept. "Dad," he said. His voice had that soft tone people use after they do something hard and want to be thanked for it. "Don't make this harder. We have our own traditions now." He wanted me to agree to the story before he had to say it twice. It was easier that way. I kept my eyes on the paper in front of me, not to be cruel, to keep my balance. "Understood," I said. Silence on his end stretched a beat too long. He had expected a fight. He had planned for it. He had not planned for this. "Good," he said. "I knew you'd get it." "I do," I said. "I get a lot of things." I kept my tone level. I did not want to hear myself. I wanted to hear him. He chuckled a little. "Look, we'll do something after. Maybe brunch the next weekend." He said brunch like a prize. In our family, a Sunday roast had always been enough. Now a word from a menu stood in for love. "That's fine," I said. More silence. He cleared his throat. "Isabella's parents brought a very special bottle. We have to go. Merry Christmas, Dad." "Turn the porch light on," I said. "What?" "Nothing," I said. "Merry Christmas." I ended the call and set the phone face down. My hands had stopped shaking. The folder lay open on the table. On top was the letter from the bank with my name printed large. Beneath it were repair receipts. Furnace, roof, property taxes. Every check drawn from my account. I thought about the word traditions and felt something settle in me. Not anger, not yet. Something colder and safer. A line appeared in my head like a chalk mark across a gym floor. I moved the letter aside and found the page I'd been looking for since the driveway. It was thinner, but it carried weight. It was my promise to myself. It was the quiet reason I had never let the title float out of my hand. I read the first line once. "Understood," I had said into the phone. In my kitchen, I said something else, but only to myself. It was enough. I spread the contents out on the table in neat rows. It calmed me to see my life as a set of lines and dates. I was never a lawyer. I did not need to be. I had built houses. I had learned to read instructions. Paper was not much different. You followed steps. You checked twice. You finished what you started. The letter from the bank had the old branch logo. The manager who had signed it had retired. It did not matter. My name was where it needed to be. I had bought that house when Michael and Isabella could not afford it. I had let them move in and promised to shift it to them when I saw steady work and steady respect. Not greed. Not a show for friends. Real steadiness. My wife and I had agreed on that. She had made me write it down. I heard her voice in the kitchen even now. "Write it down or it gets rewritten for you." The receipts told their own story. The first winter, pipes cracked. I paid. The second year, shingles lifted. I paid. The third, the furnace coughed smoke like an old man. I replaced it. My handwriting sat in the corner of each receipt. Paid by M.H. That was me. Nobody asked. Nobody thanked. I did not need thanks. I needed honesty. There was also a smaller thing, almost silly, but it mattered. A printed email from 2 summers ago. Isabella had asked me to frame the bank letter with my name on it because she said it looked official and made her feel safe. I had framed it and hung it by the mantel at their request. I had thought it odd. I had done it anyway. People hang diplomas in living rooms. Why not a letter that kept the roof in place? I put everything back into the folder and closed it. I returned the folder to the box and slid the box back into the closet. I stood there a long moment, hand on the doorknob. I could feel my pulse in my fingers. I kept my breath even. There are moments when a father wants to teach, and moments when he has to protect. I had not wanted to need this folder, but I had needed it. I was done hoping they would wake up on their own. I would use what I had saved. I turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. I slept steady. In the morning, I would stay home. I would not knock on anyone's door, and I would let the next move come to me, because I knew it would. Christmas Eve came with a clean sky. My street was quiet. I brewed coffee and sat in the chair by the window. The phone buzzed around noon. A text from my granddaughter. She had a way of using too many exclamation points. It always made me smile. She sent a photo of the tree at Michael's. It filled the room. The star I wire-tied leaned like before. She stood in front of it, grinning hard, her gap-toothed smile brighter than the lights. I wrote back that I loved the picture and I was proud of her. She sent a heart. I put the phone down. I picked it up again. I pinched the photo to zoom in, out of habit. It was the mantle that caught me. There was the frame I had hung, the bank letter with my name. It sat between two ceramic reindeer and a garland of plastic berries. I had to swallow a laugh that tried to come out wrong. They had put my name up like decoration. I felt something shift in my chest, not pain, not grief, just a clean sense of where we all stood. They had built a season around a lie. I had built a life around truth. That truth now sat in their living room, wrapped in ribbon and lights. I did not need to say a word. I saved the photo to my phone. I put the phone face down again and watched a sparrow hop under my truck and back out. My coffee had gone cold. I drank it anyway. I thought about stopping by with gifts. I did not. I thought about calling Michael to wish him well. I did not. I pictured Isabella's face if I asked her to read the frame out loud. I did not need to do that either. It would speak soon enough without me. Evening came early. I made a small dinner and ate at the kitchen counter. I turned my porch light on, out of habit. Across the street a young father steadied a ladder while his daughter tied a bow to a railing. She leaned too far, and he caught her with one hand on the back of her coat. My throat tightened. I stood and washed the plate. The house breathed in and out. It was just a house, but it had held us. It still held me. I was not alone. I had my hands, my memory, and a folder in a closet. That was enough. And I had a thing on my phone I had not used yet. The voicemail had come in a month back, the night before Thanksgiving. I had not listened to it on purpose. It had played when I was fishing for a different message. Sometimes life puts the right thing under your thumb when you are looking for something else. I sat in my chair and opened my voicemail list. I found the unknown number with the timestamp and pressed play. I turned the volume down and held the phone close to my ear. Isabella's voice came through, tinny and careless. She had called someone else and started talking before the beep. Then the beep took her words anyway. She said she was tired of waiting for me to hand it over. She said, "He won't even notice when we sell the place. He's old." She laughed. A man in the background laughed too. They talked about listing photos and timing. They used my name like a handle on a door. I stopped the message. My face was hot. It passed. I pressed play again and listened to the whole thing, steady this time. It was not guesswork or tone or my hurt feelings. It was their plan in their voices. No gloss, no good intentions. Just a move they thought I was too slow to see. I saved the message to a folder. I backed it up. I wrote the file name on a sticky note and put the note under the sugar jar. I could see it every morning and know it was still there. I would not forget. I did not need to play it again. Once was enough. I looked around my living room. My wife's photo sat on the bookcase in the same brass frame we had bought at a flea market when we were broke and happy. Her eyes were steady, even in a picture. I let my own settle. I did not want to fight. I did not want to hurt him. I wanted him to stop hurting himself and dragging me along. If he could not stop, then I would stop it for him. That was not cruelty. That was what fathers do when a grown child behaves like a stranger in their own house. I put the phone down, stood, and went to the sink. I washed the coffee mug and set it to dry. My hands were steady. My thoughts were too. I went to bed early. Morning would come with work to do, and I knew the exact door to knock on. Soon I'm going to bring justice. My son would regret being unfaithful to my legacy. You don't want to miss the consequences. But before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The bank opened early the day after Christmas. There were not many people. I wore my good coat and sat in a chair beside a fake plant until Ms. Ruiz waved me into her small office. She understood my ways. She did not talk more than she had to. She had helped me when my wife got sick and we had to move money around to keep the house paid. She knew I was not fragile. I was just careful. I set the folder on her desk. "I need this confirmed," I said. She read the bank letter. She looked at the old signature and then at her computer. She nodded. "Still current," she said. She printed a new letter with the same truth in fresher ink. My name, my payments, my responsibility. I slid across a stack of receipts. She looked, then handed them back. "You keep good records," she said. It was not a compliment. It was a fact. I liked facts. "I need something simple," I said. "A short notice that I am ending permission for them to live there." She spelled out each word as she typed. It fit on one page, not because we tried to make it small, but because the truth did not need more. She stamped it. Her stamp made a sharp sound that felt like a nail set clean. I did not tell her the rest. I did not talk about Christmas or the door or the word tradition. She did not need my story. She had given me what I needed, a tool. I could add my story to it myself. I thanked her and folded the page into the folder. I stood and shook her hand. She squeezed once, firm. "Be well," she said. I nodded. I walked out past the fake plant and the holiday display of snowmen with bank scarves on. The world was too loud in the lobby. Outside, the air was better. I drove straight to the hardware store and bought new deadbolts and a keypad for the back. I called a locksmith friend and asked if he could meet me on New Year's morning. He grunted something that meant yes. I went home, ate a simple lunch, and lay down for a while. My phone was face down on the counter. It stayed that way. I did not call anyone. I had the folder and a page with fresh ink. I had a date and a time. And I had a son who still thought doors opened for him because they always had. That part would change. The sky was still gray when the locksmith's van pulled up. He was the kind of man who did not ask questions for sport. He looked at my folder, at the page with fresh ink and the older letter, and then at me. He nodded once. "Which doors?" he asked. We got to work. Metal against metal is a calm sound if you know what you're doing. We moved steady, front, back, garage. I had brought a roll of painter's tape and the printed page from Miss Ruiz. I taped the notice at eye level on the front door. I wrote the date and time at the bottom and added my initials. Clean and simple. No threats, no speeches, just the truth in one paragraph. Inside, I set the new keypad code and wrote it in my pocket notebook. I put the old keys in a small bag and slipped them into my jacket. The locksmith tightened one last screw and tested it twice. He handed me the new keys. They felt good in my palm. I looked around the living room and saw the mantel. The bank letter still sat in the frame between the reindeer. I lifted it off the hook and set it flat on the coffee table. I set a note on top. "Keep this. It tells you what you forgot." I walked to the kitchen and opened the liquor cabinet. There was a bottle Michael bragged about because a man at work had looked it up and said it was rare. I took it down and put it in a box with 2 glasses. I was not taking it to punish him. I was taking it because I had paid for it and, if I left it, he would drink until he got brave and made worse choices. I took a last walk through the rooms. I checked windows and the side gate. I straightened a picture that had hung crooked for months. It was a photo from Michael's first day at school. His mother's hand was on his shoulder. My hand was holding his backpack strap so it would not slide off. We both looked tired and pleased. I locked the door behind me and pulled the handle to make sure it had caught. The locksmith wished me a happy new year. I nodded and shook his hand. He drove off. The street was quiet. A neighbor waved. I waved back. The new key was warm in my pocket. It was 7 a.m. I went to my truck and sat. I looked at the house that had been a promise and a burden. It was quiet now. It was mine again, in fact, in feeling. By noon, it would speak for itself. He came late morning, the way people arrive for a show they expect to run. A dark SUV. Loud music cut off when the door opened. Michael walked up the drive with two friends behind him. They carried paper bags. He smiled for their benefit and talked too loud. He put his key in the lock. It did not turn. He frowned and tried again. He rattled the knob. The sound was a small, clear bell to me. He looked over his shoulder like he could laugh it off if he wanted. His friends looked at the taped notice. One of them read it out loud, slow. I stood up from the porch chair to my right. I had been there the whole time. He had not seen me because he had not looked. He never looked to the side. He saw me then and went red. "Open the door, Dad," he said. There was no hello. His voice was stiff as metal. He had not said Dad like that since he was 16 and wanted my truck. "It's not yours to invite anyone into," I said. My voice was calm. I was careful to keep it that way. I could feel the edge of my temper like a hot line. I did not cross it. He laughed, still playing to the crowd. "Come on, don't do this." He lifted the notice off the door and waved it like a napkin. "This isn't real." "It is," I said, "and you know it." He stepped closer. The friends took a step back. He lowered his voice a little. "You wouldn't." I reached into my jacket and held up the small bag of old keys. I set it on the porch rail. "These are yours to remember," I said. "They do not fit here anymore." His jaw worked. He grabbed for the doorknob again. It did not turn. He shoved his shoulder against the door. It did not move. He stepped back and looked at me in a way I had seen once before, when he was a boy and realized gravity would not let him keep a kite in the air no matter how he ordered it to. He had to learn how to fly it, not demand the wind obey. He took out his phone. His thumb moved fast. He was not thinking anymore. He was just moving. The friends stood off to the side like men who had stumbled onto a train track and heard a sound they did not understand. I kept my place. The new keys were in my right pocket. My left hand rested on the porch rail. He glared. I did not. There are moments where it is enough to show and not tell. I took the folder from my bag and set it on the porch table. I opened it so he would not have to take it from me. I put the bank letter on top. My name sat there, simple and black. My payments lined up in rows behind it. He looked at the page and then away, like a child squinting at the sun. "So what?" he said. He had defiance left, but it was thin. "So you know what you knew," I said, "and what you pretended to forget." He reached for the letter like he might tear it. I put my hand on it first and lifted it away. "No." I slid a copy toward him instead. I had made extra. He stared down at it. His friends were quiet now. One of them muttered something about, "Man, this is bad," and then bit it off. I added the receipts, roof, furnace, taxes. He recognized my handwriting in the corners. His shoulders dipped. His eyes moved fast over the numbers like speed would change them. "You said you were going to give it to me," he said, low. "Not to the friends now, to me. When you stood on your own," I said. "When you treated my home like a home. When you treated me like a father, not a wallet. That was the deal. You think I forgot what a promise is because I got old?" I remember every word. He swallowed. He glanced back at his friends, and that was the tell. He still wanted an audience. He was still choosing them. The old ache in my chest flared and faded. I let it go. I picked up the framed letter from the coffee table inside, where I'd left it. I came back to the threshold and set it so he could see it. "You asked me to hang this," I said. "You wanted it where you could see it. I did that. You can see it now." He stared at the frame and then at the copy in his hand. He did not speak. It was enough for the moment. The door behind me was solid. It had felt flimsy for years because I had let it. It was not flimsy. He took a breath like he was going to shout. He did not. He took out his phone again with jerky, angry movements. "Fine," he said. "We'll get someone who will open it." And he dialed the police. It is a painful thing to see your child call men in uniforms to settle what you should have been able to teach him at a table. Still, I let the call happen. I was not afraid of it. I had nothing to hide, and everything I held was plain. The cruiser pulled up faster than I expected. The officers walked up the drive with neutral faces. Michael started talking before they said hello. He pointed at me. He pointed at the door. He waved the notice he had ripped off and crumpled. He said words like, "my house," and "change the locks," and "illegal." I stood. I waited for my turn. When the shorter officer looked at me, I handed over my ID and the new letter from the bank. I did not tell a story. I let the paper and the key in my pocket speak. I handed him the simple page that Miss Ruiz had typed. He read each line. He nodded once. The taller officer asked Michael a few questions that sifted the heat out of his words and left the facts. Whose name was on the old letter he liked to show off over drinks? Who had paid for the furnace that winter it was 10 below? Who had framed the very proof and hung it by the tree? Michael's answers got smaller. He tried to float the word tradition again. It did not land on their ears the way it had on mine at the door. Tradition does not open doors built on other people's backs. The shorter officer handed Michael his license back. "This is a civil matter," he said, "and from what I can see, it's not in your favor today. You can collect your personal things by arrangement with your father. Not now. Not like this." Michael flinched at the word father said out in the air like that. He had been using it as a lever. The officer used it as a fact. The officers told him to leave for now. If he did not, they would write a trespass warning that would bite harder later. He looked at me, waiting for me to rescue him from a consequence again. That look broke something in me that needed breaking. It had been there for years, and I had fed it. No more. He stepped back off the porch. His friends stared at their shoes. The shorter officer nodded to me and turned away. The cruiser left, and the sound of it rolling down the street was softer than I expected. Michael stood on the walk, palms open like he was catching rain. There was no rain. He lowered his hands and looked at me. He had one more try in him, and I could feel it coming. I picked up the folder again and held it under my arm. I did not want paper between us anymore. I wanted him to hear a father, not a file. "Say you're sorry, Michael," I said. "Mean it." "Not for the door. For the way you talked to me at that door. For the year you've spent talking about me like a problem you needed to solve. For putting me on a schedule like a delivery man. Say it, and we can sit and figure a path back." He stared like I had asked him to dig a ditch with his hands. Pride is a bad shovel. It costs more than it moves. "You wouldn't," he said again, softer now. But it wasn't even a statement. It was a hope said out loud, and hope is thinner than truth. I took out my phone and pressed one button. Isabella's voice spilled into the open air, sharp and bright. "He won't even notice when we sell the place." "He's old." There was the laugh. There was the man in the background. There were the words about listing and timing and how I would not see. Michael went still like a deer at a road edge. He listened to the end with his jaw set and his eyes on my shoes. When the message stopped, he did not speak for a long breath. "She didn't mean," he began. "She did," I said, "and so did you." It isn't the words I cannot forgive. It's the belief behind them. You believed I would not notice because you could not imagine I still paid attention. You believed doors open themselves if you talk fast enough. He looked toward the house. He could not help it. He loved the thing itself. It was a good house. I had made sure of that. He had never learned to love the work that made it hold. He had loved the brag. That part died on my porch. He swallowed again. What do you want? There it was. A small, late question, still aimed at a transaction. I want respect, I said. If you have it in you, we can talk next week at noon in a public place. No raised voices, no friends, no phones. If you don't, then you don't come here again. He stared at me with eyes that were my own at his age, before life sank in. He opened his mouth and closed it. He turned and walked down the drive without a goodbye. I slept well that night. Morning came without the knot under my ribs. I made coffee and watched the steam. It was good to do a simple thing and not have it turn into a moral debate in my head. I took my notebook and wrote the date. I wrote 30 days. That was what I was willing to offer him. Time to collect his things with me or an officer present. Calm, clean, no point in cruelty. At 9 I called him and left a message. I said the words I had written in my notebook. I invited him to the meeting at noon on Tuesday at the diner we had used when he was learning to drive. He had not looked up from his phone much then either. I had hope anyway, and I allowed myself that. I also spoke a truth I had never said out loud to him. Your mother and I set conditions when we helped, I said. We never handed you a gift that glued your hands to mine. We offered a path. You have not walked it. If you want to, I will clear brush until it is passable again, but I won't carry you. I hung up. I stood at the sink and washed the single cup I had used. I dried it and set it in the rack. A father spends most of his life doing small things nobody sees. That is good work. That is honest work. It does not have to end in a show of mercy or a public scolding. It can end in a clean counter in a door that locks. He did not call back that day. That was his choice. I had made mine. I wrote the meeting time on a paper and stuck it to the fridge. I stuck another note below it that said, if he does not come, you still go. Order coffee. Smile at the waitress. Pay the bill. Live anyway. I walked the yard and checked the fence line. I fixed a loose picket. It felt good to use a hammer for a thing that would hold. I stacked old boards by the side gate to haul later. The air had a bite. I liked it. I stood at the back steps and looked at the kitchen window. My wife had stood in that window 1,000 times. I had seen her there and felt like a rich man. I felt that again for a brief, clean second. Then I went inside and wrote an inventory list. Calm things for a calm day. He had 30 days to do his part. I had the rest of my life to do mine. A week passed without his call. I did not wait by the phone. I kept my hands busy. I drove to the house in the afternoons and worked through rooms like a careful tide. I boxed what was his. I tagged each box with a card and a piece of blue tape. I set my granddaughter's drawings in a plastic tub with a solid lid. Those would not go back to a place where adults treated love like a maneuver. In the bedroom I found a shoebox on the closet shelf filled with ticket stubs and a rubber-banded stack of old snapshots. There was one of Michael and me in front of a tent by the lake. He was 11 and angry that the fish were not biting. He had thrown a rock and almost hit me. I had grabbed his wrist and said words I regretted the second I said them. Then I had apologized before dusk, and he had laughed late into the night when a bullfrog sang like a broken horn. Memory is a hard, nice thing. It cuts both ways. I set aside the liquor box I had packed on New Year's morning. I was not a drinker. I did not want it in my house. I put it on a shelf in the hall closet and wrote a note. Sell and add to college fund. I would not throw it out. Waste is a kind of sin I could not stand. I would turn it into something useful if I could. I vacuumed. I wiped counters. I fixed a drawer that stuck. It was not a performance. It was a way to feel my feet on the floor. When you are old, people treat you like a floating head. Tasks anchor you. Before I left, I walked through each room and said my wife's name in a voice that did not need to carry. Not because she was in the walls, because I had promised her I would keep our boy safe as long as he let me. There was no oath about blindness. There was no oath about letting him set fire to a life because he found matches. I locked the door and checked it twice. I turned to go and saw the neighbor across the street. She lifted a hand like a question. I lifted mine back like an answer. She nodded. It was enough. I put the key in my pocket and felt its weight. It did not feel like power. It felt like responsibility. I went home and set a pot of soup to simmer. The house held the smell. I wrote a list of what still needed doing and drew a line through 3 items. When men do not call, sometimes the world does. He did not show at the diner. I sat at noon and drank coffee and left a tip that would make sense to a woman who had worked a long shift. I paid and walked out into the bright cold. I did not feel sorry for myself. I did not feel noble. I felt awake. Back home, I opened my laptop and logged into my account. I set up an automatic transfer from the rent I would charge the new tenants when the time came. It would go into a simple account in my granddaughter's name. I wrote school in the memo. I did not tell anyone. I did not need a thank you from a child for a thing that was my joy to do. I also wrote a small check to the shelter where my wife used to bring blankets each fall. I signed it with care and put it in an envelope with her name in the corner. It helped, not because it fixed anything, because it pointed my day toward something that looked like the woman I loved. I made a call to a property manager I trusted and asked her to start a search for tenants with steady work. I told her I wanted quiet people who mowed their own lawn and liked to fix small things. She laughed and said that sounded like me. I said it used to. I sent Michael one more message. It was short. I listed the days I would be at the house at noon with an officer available to watch him pick up his boxes. I kept the tone sturdy and plain. No anger, no tenderness either. Tenderness was a thing for people who held their side of the rope. I closed the laptop and stood at the sink. I could see my reflection in the window. The porch light behind me was off. It would be on by dusk. The habit stayed with me. I thought about the boy he had been and the man he could still be. People say men do not change. I have changed more times than I can count. I hoped he would change. I did not count on it. I put the envelope for the shelter by the door. I washed my hands. I dried them slow. Then I opened the front door to fresh air and stood there a moment, letting it fill the house. He called at dusk. The light outside shifted from blue to gray. I answered because I am still a father. "You ruined my life," he said. No greeting. No breath for a question. Just the old habit, pressed hard. "I ended the part where you lived on my back," I said. My voice surprised me. It was not cruel. It was not soft. It was the voice I used to use when he was 5 and put his hand too close to the stove. "You did this to punish me," he said. "I did this to save you from worse," I said. "You were going to sell a house you did not own and get sued by a stranger who would not love you when it was over. You would have called me then, too. You would have asked for help. I was tired of paying for mistakes you made on purpose." Silence stretched between us. I could hear him breathing. I could hear my own breath in my chest, steady as a clock I had fixed last summer when the pendulum stuck. "What now?" he asked at last. The words were so small they almost slid past me. It is hard to hear humility. It is rare. It gets buried under other sounds. "Now you come on Thursday at noon with a calm face," I said. "You pick up your boxes. You say thank you when the officer holds the door. You leave your key on the table. You call me next week if you can talk like a man who knows he broke something and wants to fix it. And if you cannot, you do not call." He did not answer. He waited. I waited with him. Waiting is a thing I have learned to do without filling it with talk. Okay, he said finally. Thursday. Good, I said. We hung up. I stood in the quiet living room. I went to the wall and turned on the porch light. The yellow glow spread across the steps. A car went by slow, and a child in the back seat pointed at something I could not see. I sat in my chair and looked at my wife's photo. I did right, I said out loud. I did not need an answer. I knew. The house was mine again in more than title. It was mine because I had set a line and kept it. I had used what I had saved for the thing I had promised to protect. The cost was high, but the price had already been paid across too many small moments. Is a father wrong to close a door so a grown son learns how to knock? Would you do the same thing? Share your opinion on revenge and justice in the comment section.
My grandpa's worst really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales stories like this, hit subscribe.